Welcome to Authentic Models, your ultimate destination for engaging life stories and captivating journeys of the modeling world's most celebrated figures. From legendary runway stars to pioneering fashion influencers, we delve into the lives and careers of those who've redefined style and set new standards in the industry. Tune in every week for fresh content featuring rare interviews, exclusive behind-the-scenes access, and inspiring accounts of models who've made a lasting impression on fashion history. Today on our highlight is LALAKOI. LALAKOI was born in a city where the buildings reached higher than the clouds and the people moved like rivers across streets of glass and shadow. She was the kind of child who sat quietly watching reflections. Instead of chasing noise, her mother worked 3 jobs, and her father was a face in a photograph she never fully understood. So LALAKOI learned early to rely on silence, an instinct and the language of posture and pause. By the time she was 10, she had already outgrown most things, including the smallness of people's expectations and the stories that tried to define her. She would walk through crowded markets, and strangers would turn their heads not just because of her height or the shape of her eyes, but because she carried something unspoken, a gravity, a stillness that made time slow around her. She was discovered not once, but many times, first by a retired fashion editor who saw her waiting for a bus and handed her a number scribbled on a receipt, then by a photographer who stopped her in a bookstore and asked to capture the way the sunlight rested on her cheekbones, and finally by an agency scout who watched her for 20 minutes before daring to speak. And every time, she said no, until one day she said maybe, and that was the beginning of the next version of her story. The modeling world opened like a strange gate, and LALAKOI stepped through not with hunger, but with observation. She studied light, angles, architecture, makeup, history. She asked the questions others didn't think to ask. She watched how power moved in a room, how truth lived in moments between clicks, how vulnerability could be a kind of armor. Her first shoot was in a warehouse with broken windows and dust like gold in the air. And when the photos came out, people said she looked like she wasn't from this time, like she belonged to some future or forgotten past. And from there it grew: the shows, the campaigns, the long flights, the weeks with no sleep, the fittings where no one looked you in the eye, and the moments on runways where the world disappeared and it was just breath and fabric and sound. She walked for names that lived in glass towers, wore dresses worth more than her childhood apartment, and learned to become still even when the flash burned and the whispers cut. She did not smile much in photos, not because she couldn't, but because she wanted to challenge the idea that beauty had to be soft. She gave beauty edges, she gave silence meaning. She let her walk speak louder than applause, and soon designers began to ask not for a look, but for LALAKOI herself. She became the muse not because she tried to be, but because she already was. She brought poetry into posture, made elegance a rebellion, and carved space for others who had never seen themselves reflected in the pages of magazines. She was one of the first to walk a major runway in a traditional ancestral silhouette paired with futuristic design, and the image went viral, etched into screens and skins. She used her voice sparingly, but when she did, people listened. She spoke about sustainability not as a trend, but as a survival. She questioned the industry she stood in. She launched her own creative collective that combined storytelling, fashion, sound, and memory. She built a platform for underrepresented models, not as charity, but as justice. She said once that she was not a brand, she was a mirror. She did not want followers, she wanted resonance. She continued to model, but only on her terms, choosing projects like sacred texts, refusing anything that dulled her or distorted her message. And as the years passed, she did not disappear. She expanded, becoming a director, a curator, a mother to ideas, and eventually a writer. Her book, titled Form Without Permission, became a bestseller not for its gossip, but for its grace, a meditation on self-image, power, silence, and how to hold your shape in a world that wants to mold you. By the time she was 50, she had shifted the industry. She had entered as a ghost and left as a legend. People no longer asked, "Who is LALAKOI M?" They asked, "What would LALAKOI do?" And in quiet corners of design studios and school libraries and old train stations, someone would see a certain tilt of the head, a way of walking, and whisper her name like a memory. And maybe, just maybe, she would turn around